Exposed. How my family's neglect led to an unexpected journey to my dream villa at 30. An old stack of papers lay scattered across Charlie's kitchen table, the air thick with dust and disappointment. For years the crumbling walls of his Appalachian home echoed his childhood dreams. Now whispers drowned in the neglect of his family, a family that never seemed to care about the brilliance he harbored inside. He remembered Mr. Jennings, his chemistry teacher, who believed in him when no one else did. The way he assigned complex formulas that sparked hope in Charlie's heart. Now, with Mr. Jennings dead and his wisdom silenced forever, Charlie couldn't escape the feeling that he was drowning in forgotten potential. Charlie ran his fingers over the pages. Bills and overdue notices gave way to something extraordinary: a title deed to a villa, a gem nestled in a wealthy community, entirely different from his dilapidated surroundings. Conflicting emotions surged through him. Excitement for a future that could be, accompanied by gut-wrenching guilt for the dreams he felt compelled to abandon. Should he claim this inheritance? Could he abandon the family that had never bothered to nurture the bright mind they had produced? With every tick of his aging clock, his mind raced. The prospect of financial freedom was intoxicating, breathing life into the stagnant existence he'd been suffocated by for too long. Yet the darker side whispered fears of betrayal, of severing the last tether to a familial bond that felt more like a shackle. What if his parents found out? They would see him as a traitor, the boy who turned his back on the roots that had left him stranded for far too long. Yet what kind of loyalty was it that anchored him to apathy and neglect? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Charlie grappled with the moral dilemma, work at the lab feigned simplicity but was anything but. Each passing day felt like a battle against elitist colleagues who believed heritage mattered more than intellect. Their smirks and sideways glances felt like daggers, each snide remark filling him with pent-up rage. He was determined to prove them wrong, to stand tall with his head held high. Yet, with every dismissal, he felt the familiar weight of family loyalty threaten to pull him back into obscurity. Then, out of the blue, he collided with an old rival, Greg, whose triumphs only amplified Charlie's insecurities. Greg thrived under the spotlight, the epitome of success fueled by privilege. As they faced off over a new project, the stakes transcended professional ambition. It symbolized everything Charlie resented about the chasm that separated them. Their rivalry ignited a fire within him, a tempest of emotions igniting the face down. Amidst this chaos, the villa beckoned like an oasis in his parched existence. Would it truly liberate him? Or merely hollow him further? Clarity felt elusive, the walls around him closing in as he stood at a precipice. Could he transcend the emotional shackles of his past? Or would he remain tethered to a lineage that had long resigned itself to mediocrity? The tension hung thick and palpable, leaving Charlie as one chasing a breath he could barely grasp, teetering on the edge of whether to embrace his fierce ambition or remain loyal to a family that had kept him in the shadows for far too long. Charlie awoke the next morning with the weight of the deed still pressing on his mind. As he stared out of the grimy window, he noticed the sun breaking over the horizon, a stark contrast to the dimness surrounding him. The brilliant rays ignited a flicker of hope, one he hadn't dared to feel for years. Today would not be about being buried in doubt. It had to be about decision-making and action. The villa was not merely a property, it was a chance to reclaim his identity. His first thought was to revisit the lab, to face his colleagues and, more chillingly, Greg. As he prepped himself, he recognized that each moment he spent grappling with guilt pulled him deeper into the abyss of his family's neglect. They had pushed him into hiding. Now was the time for emergence. At work, the sterile walls of the lab seemed to close in as if they were conspiring against him. Yet, Charlie took a deep breath and made his way toward his workstation, determination coursing through him like electrifying adrenaline. When he arrived, he found an email waiting, a scathing review of his last project from Greg. That familiar spark of anger ignited within him, challenging his restraint. Rather than cower, Charlie decided it was time to confront this rivalry head-on. He could feel the tension coursing through him when he saw Greg across the room, chuckling with other colleagues who had grown weary of Charlie's stubborn insistence on innovation. "Hey, Greg," Charlie called out, surprising even himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Got a minute?" Greg's scoff echoed in the small space as he ambled toward Charlie, clearly expecting amusement. "What is it, Charlie? I assume you're not accustomed to asking for my time." "I think it's time we reevaluate this project," Charlie said, fixing his eyes on Greg's, defiance simmering beneath his polite tone. "Your approach centers on tradition while we both know this field is rapidly evolving. If we don't adapt, we're done before we begin." Charlie felt himself rush with newfound conviction. This was no longer about winning. It was about leading. Greg's eyes narrowed. A mix of disdain and shock was painted across his face. "You think you can outsmart me? Your last project barely scraped by. Why would anyone listen to you?" "Maybe because I'm willing to take the risks you're too scared to take," Charlie shot back, his voice steadying. The auditorium of his own insecurities began to fade as he realized he was standing taller. The moment felt electric, charged with the possibility of breaking free from the chains of his past. Every snide remark, every derisive glance infused him with clarity. He was worthy of this fight. He felt the tremors of his aspirations coalesce, inspiring confidence he had once thought unreachable. With every word exchanged, doubt was stripped away piece by piece, leaving raw determination in its place. Taking control of his narrative, Charlie shifted his gaze from Greg to the greater responsibility before him. Acknowledging the shift within his heart, he returned to his workspace. A sense of exhilaration coursed through him. Yet, another thought flickered. What would it mean to actually embrace the villa? To break the familial ties that had bound him? The allure of independence came with heavy questions about loyalty. The clock ticked ominously in the background, a reminder that time was running out. Opportunities were at stake. His future hung in the balance. The choice stretched before him, teasing with possibility and heartache alike. What awaited him at the villa could either catalyze his burgeoning potential or lay bare the scars that still haunted him. Stefan's old words resonated. To thrive, you must embrace discomfort. As he prepared to head home that evening, the villa whispered promises of freedom. Was he ready to step into that light and risk everything in the process? The door loomed before him, the inevitable decision hanging heavy in the air. The time had come to face all that he had avoided. Could he confront not just Greg, but the very legacy of neglect and mediocrity that sought to hold him captive? Returning home that evening, Charlie felt the city pulse around him, the neon lights cutting through the dusk like hopeful beacons. As he navigated through the bustling throngs, his mind kept circling back to the confrontation with Greg. The exhilaration of standing his ground had opened a fissure of realization within him. He was capable of far more than he had allowed himself to believe. Arriving at his apartment, he tossed his keys onto the cluttered countertop and paced the small space. The air was thick with anticipation. Shadows seemed to gather, reflecting his inner turmoil. Was he ready to invest in the villa, to anchor himself to a new identity, or would he cling to the comfort of past failures? He opened his laptop and began drafting a proposal for a revised direction of the project. The words flowed with an unfamiliar ease, his creativity unbound. Each sentence seemed to reshape fragments of his past, positioning them into a future he was strategically designing. This wasn't merely about professional ambition. It was a pivotal act of self-reclamation, infused with lessons from the road less traveled. As he hit send on the email addressed to Greg and the team, the weight on his shoulders shifted slightly. It was a calculated risk, one he intended to follow up on the next day. A spark surged within him, igniting a long-dormant passion that he had suppressed in favor of others' doubt. The night wore on and sleep evaded him. Images of the villa danced in his mind, a stark contrast to the sterile lab he was used to. Perhaps this was the anchor he had yearned for. A place where he could cultivate his vision without the shadow of familial expectations. Yet, an uncomfortable thought crept in. Would they view him as a failure if he truly embraced this new path? He recalled his father's disapproving words echoing through years of his childhood. No son of mine is going to squander his potential on reckless dreams. A flush of anger coursed through him, but he anchored himself in resolve. Dreams weren't reckless, they were essential for growth. It was time to shed the shackles of external judgment and to embrace the vision stitched into his very spirit. The next day at the lab, Charlie noticed an undercurrent of tension as his colleagues readied themselves for the weekly staff meeting. A palpable shift had occurred in the atmosphere, one that he couldn't ignore. Greg was standing at the front, glancing at the agenda with a disapproving frown. He was prepared to stamp out any notion of innovation. When the meeting began, Charlie felt his heart pound as he steeled himself to speak. He sensed an audience curious about the proposal he had sent, and he intended to leverage that curiosity. As Greg launched into his defense of the status quo, Charlie seized the moment. "Actually, I've prepared a proposal that may outline a new approach for us," he said, interrupting Greg with an authority that surprised him. The murmurs of surprise echoed through the room, but he continued unyielding. "It's time we reframe our methods and engage with emerging technologies. If you think about it, staying stagnant will only diminish our reputation." Charlie locked eyes with Greg, an unspoken challenge lingering in the air. The opposition from Greg was expected. He had always wielded his influence with the assurance of authority. Yet, with each passing moment, Charlie felt emboldened. As he spoke, he communicated a passionate vision, layering it with data that he had spent the night assembling. Seeing Greg's glaring disapproval shifted Charlie's perception from fear to opportunity. Here was a man whose opposition had always stifled him, and now he stood determined to galvanize his colleagues with progressive ideas. "We can't let fear dictate our decisions. We need a change, and that starts with each of us taking a risk." The tension in the room transformed subtly. Curiosity danced alongside skepticism. Charlie offered tangible examples, projecting a future where his team thrived through adaptation rather than conformance. The brief glances exchanged among his peers hinted at burgeoning interest. When the meeting adjourned, Charlie stood tall. He could feel his hands trembling. But this tremor was different. It was electric. He had navigated the precarious balance between vulnerability and conviction, laying bare not only his professional aspirations but his personal redemption. Outside the lab, a sharp breeze whipped through the streets, invigorating him further. He had breached a boundary he never dreamed possible, but his internal battle was far from over. How would he truly embrace the transformation ahead, especially with the specter of familial expectations casting long shadows? As he walked toward his car, his phone buzzed. An unforeseen message from his sister awaited. "I need to talk. Mom and Dad want to discuss the villa." The words felt like a challenge pulling at him, echoing his insecurities. Would he stand firm against the legacies trying to claim him? Or would he allow their expectations to sway him back into the darkness? The road ahead twisted unpredictably. In all his momentum, was he ready for the confrontation that awaited him? Not only with his family but with the remnants of who he once was? Charlie stood frozen for a moment, staring at his phone. The brief message from his sister held a weight he could hardly comprehend. His instincts screamed to retreat, to cling to the familiar strings of doubt that his parents deftly spun throughout his life. Yet, with the adrenaline of the meeting still coursing through him, he felt an urge to engage, to confront the voices that had shaped so much of his self-perception. The drive home was unnerving. Traffic crawled as he replayed his sister's words. "Mom and Dad want to discuss the villa." It pulled on an undercurrent of guilt that often surfaced when family was involved. Charlie had spent too many years trying to meet their expectations, believing that it was the only way to earn their love. But with each passing day in the lab, he felt a surety crystallizing within him, a realization that his definition of success might just be different from theirs. Arriving home, he found himself pacing again. The four walls reminded him of all the times he had wrestled with the need for validation. He opened the door to his bedroom, where remnants of his childhood still lingered, pinned crayons and half-assembled models crammed into forgotten drawers. Each item was a ghost of the expectations that whispered disapproval at the fringes of his consciousness. Maybe it was time to get rid of these remnants, releasing their hold over him. Charlie grabbed a box, heart racing as he began tossing away remnants of a version of himself that no longer fit. With every item discarded, he felt a tug toward liberation. This act became cathartic, amplifying the voices advocating for his new vision, the villa where he could cultivate his creativity. As he discarded his childhood artifacts, he felt the familiar weight of his family's expectations start to lift, replaced by something unfamiliar yet invigorating, a growing sense of empowerment. Just as he finished clearing the last of the clutter, another notification buzzed. It was a message from Greg, calling for a follow-up on the proposal. The anticipation was palpable, feeding the fire that had ignited within him. Here was a chance to solidify his transformation in the professional arena, to push boundaries even further. But could he uphold his newfound strength when faced with Greg's skepticism once again? With dark clouds looming outside, Charlie prepared for a video call with his sister instead of letting anxiety over the meeting consume him. She had always been the bridge to their parents, a mediator in their discussions. The irony of that position wasn't lost on him. As he dialed, he felt a knot in his stomach, unsure if this discussion would reinforce his dedication to change or draw him back into the comfort of their approval. "Hey Charlie," his sister greeted, her tone steady but her eyes revealing concern. "Hey," he replied, taking a breath. "What's this about Mom and Dad wanting to talk about the villa?" She shifted uncomfortably. "They're worried you're trying to make another bad decision. You know they think it's unrealistic." Charlie felt every nerve in his body tense at her words, each syllable threatening to crumble his resolve. "But it's more than that. It's not just a property. It's about creating what I want, not what they want." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken understanding. His sister observed him, as if weighing how fragile he still felt beneath the surface. "You've always done what they wanted, Charlie. I just don't want to see you hurt again. But what if this time it's different?" He leaned into his own thoughts. "This is about living for myself." With her silence echoing, he could hear the faintest glimmer of recognition from her side. Maybe she too was beginning to see the shift within him, the fight for authenticity that defied his upbringing. As he ended the call, a flicker of anxiety resurfaced. The conversation was only the first part of confronting his family. It would be more difficult than facing Greg. How would he convince them he was chasing not a mere dream but an essential part of who he was? With the storm brewing outside mirroring the turmoil inside him, Charlie gazed out the window, thoughts swirling in a maelstrom of fear and excitement. He felt poised on the edge of an unknown precipice, teetering between the expectations of his family and the powerful drive toward his newly envisioned future. But in that moment, he realized he was tired of running from disappointment. He craved the confrontation that would ultimately declare his independence. As the winds howled, his heart raced from anticipation mixed with lingering doubt. He sensed that the time had come to finally face the legacies that sought to bind him. Would this reckoning be the start of self-affirmation, or would he again yield to familial pressure? Tomorrow's conversation with his parents would demand his most honest self, a self he was still figuring out how to communicate. The stakes were high and deep within. He understood that if he faltered now, it would signal a retreat back into mediocrity, the very fate he was desperate to escape. As dawn broke, soft rays of sunlight spilled into Charlie's room, gently illuminating the debris of his childhood he had discarded only hours before. Each beam felt like a quiet affirmation, a reminder of the undeniable resolve he was beginning to cultivate. He had set himself on this unexpected path of self-discovery, fueled by a desire to redefine his reality, and yet, the impending conversation with his parents loomed ominously ahead. The morning passed in agonizing slow motion. He found himself revisiting every pocket of uncertainty. What if their disapproval echoed the past? Would their arguments pull him back into the murky waters of obligation and guilt? He had tried so hard to push against those currents, but he feared this conversation might drown him. Taking a deep breath, he gestured toward his dimensions of change, envisioning his future villa as a sanctuary for his creativity and expression of his true self, a radical departure from his family's vision. He turned to his desk, scattered with notes and concepts for his proposal. Each one was a thread connecting him to the professional world he craved, a world where his thoughts were valued, not minimized. He began to write furiously, solidifying his ideas while blocking out the whirlpool of anxious thoughts threatening to submerge him. Words flowed like a river, crafting a narrative of what he believed the villa would mean, not just for him but for the stories he could tell, the visions he could share. It became a manifestation of his liberation, shaping into something more than just a structure. It was about his journey toward authenticity. While the clock ticked down to the scheduled family meeting, Charlie could feel the duality of his emotions, ambivalence toward their skepticism contrasting sharply with a fierce desire to stand his ground. The moment of truth awaited him, encapsulating everything he had been working towards. He would confront the roots of doubt sewn tightly into his upbringing with newfound clarity as he prepared for the video call. A wave of nausea hit him. This was not just about a villa. It was about asserting his identity and claiming ownership of his dreams. He needed to express how their worries, while rooted in love, often morphed into chains that bound him. He had grown tired of granting them the power to dictate his happiness. Finally, the computer chimed with incoming calls. Charlie cleared his throat, forcing composure onto his face as the screen flickered to life, revealing his parents. Their expressions reflected a mixture of concern and cautious anticipation, the same looks he remembered from childhood when sharing news he feared would invite disapproval. "Hey Charlie, thanks for joining us," his mother began, an underlying tremor in her voice. "Of course. I wanted to talk to you about the villa," he replied, feeling his pulse race yet anchored by the conviction burning within him. "Can you explain to us why you think this is a good idea?" His dad jumped in. "Just seems to be a lot." Charlie swallowed hard. "I understand your concerns," he started, carefully choosing his words. "But this isn't just a property to me. It's a chance to create something meaningful in my life." As he spoke, a familiar wave of doubt crested within him, but this time he clamped down on it. He needed to be clear. His path was not about seeking their approval but about affirming his own aspirations. "I know you're worried about me making the wrong choices," he continued, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "But my choices are no longer yours for the taking. Nor are they reflections of past failures. This isn't about disappointment. It's about living authentically." The silence after his words felt heavy. He could almost see the wheels of their thoughts turning, recalibrating the expectations they had placed on him throughout his life. But just as he thought he had reached them, his mother's face tightened with concern. "Charlie, we just want what's best for you. You've had these ideas before, and they sometimes lead to regret." Charlie felt a sharp pain in his chest at her words. Would the familiarity of their fears attempt to reignite the old patterns? He was perched on the precipice of self-realization, yet their battle-worn narratives started to creep back in a warning against heartbreak. But what if he paused, realizing he was grappling against more than just their doubts? He was also wrestling with his own fears of failure. What if this time I succeed? What if this is where I find my footing? The conversation had shifted. No longer just a strained negotiation. It became an exploration of aspirations intertwined with fear, an uncomfortable yet necessary confrontation. Each word exchange solidified the stance he wanted to take, yet questioned the deeper motivations driving both sides. Suddenly, a revelation struck him like lightning. Charlie had been caught in his parents' narrative, yet perhaps he needed to consider theirs in some capacity too. Did their fears stem from love or from their own past disappointments? As the call continued, he peered through the veil of familial concern and began to understand this was not just a disagreement but a dialogue toward mutual understanding, a landscape they could navigate together, albeit one fraught with tension. Yet, as they ventured deeper into the discussion, shadows of their disappointment lingered. He realized it wouldn't be enough to merely assert his independence. He needed to transform this conflict into a partnership of sorts with his family, merging his vision with their fears into something meaningful. As the conversation began to wind down, Charlie sensed he was on uncharted ground. He had stumbled upon a threshold, one that could lead to fundamental change not just for him but for them as well. He felt the power within himself shift, ready to confront the vernacular of familial relationships head-on. And amidst discussions of doubt and dreams, Charlie couldn't help but wonder what could it mean to embrace vulnerability on this path of independence? What would the next confrontation reveal? The minute the video call ended, Charlie leaned back in his chair, the remnants of the conversation still swirling in his mind like autumn leaves caught in a gust. The tension that had pulsed through the call, a tension rooted in love yet tinged with fear, lingered in the silence of his room, and he found himself both relieved and unsettled. He had walked a tightrope, balancing his aspirations against his parents' expectations, and the first step had been taken. But what did this mean for the future? Could he transform this dialogue into tangible change, rather than letting it decay into another cycle of undercurrents, his dreams muted by external concerns? He had managed to assert himself, yet a question gnawed at him. How could he continue this effort without further alienating the people who loved him? As night cloaked the day, he took to the unkempt desk again, the chaos of paper and pens now a compelling battlefield for his ambitions. He retrieved the notes he had written before the call, but instead of seeing them as mere sketches for the villa, he perceived them as a blueprint of his soul, an assertion of who he was. Each idea reflected the layers of his identity, beckoning him to dig deeper and manifest what he truly desired, not just in the villa, but in his life. The thought jolted him into action. He grabbed the highest stack of paper and flung it aside, making room for fresh concepts. The anger that bubbled beneath moments of confrontation began to morph into something constructive. He would embody the independence he sought, but with compassion, navigating the emotional landscape of relationships. He fetched a folder labeled Future Proposals, resolute to map out not only building ideas but also plans to bridge the gap between his dreams and familial love. Each sentence he penned felt like chiseling through stone, revealing the figure beneath, an artist learning to sculpt his own narrative. Rather than banishing his parents' fears outright, why not integrate them? With deftness, he sketched ideas that showed growth, innovation, and the practical steps needed to make his dreams a reality, all while keeping an open invitation for dialogue with his family. He considered a series of discussions designed to break down their barriers, perhaps offering a more collaborative approach where his vision acknowledged their anxieties and created space for compromise. What if he invited them to the villa's design meetings once ideas took form? Might that help translate their worry into input? He could turn their opposition into support through demonstration, making them stakeholders in a shared journey, rather than adversaries in conflict. As he outlined this transformative process, visions of his villa morphed into collaborative spaces, an art studio infused with natural light, open concept rooms that encouraged family gatherings, and an outdoor terrace for reflection, all serving as metaphors for his renewed approach to life. Charlie paused, the ink on the page stilled, and he found himself standing at a threshold yet again, this time between his independence and the potential integration with his family's hopes. What if this effort became the foundation not only for his ambitious dream but also a redefined family dynamic? This moment unfolded like the dawn he had seen earlier, brightening possibilities that had seemed out of reach. He could even weave in a personal developmental element, inviting them to contribute ideas from their past experiences, transforming their memories into inspiration. Yet, as revelation dawned, so too did the weight of practice. Could he maintain this balance in the face of their inevitable skepticism? Would they be willing to see him as something other than a child rushing headlong into what they perceived as peril? The path ahead remained fraught with anxiety, yet illuminating hints of potential beckoned him forward. Driven by a renewed sense of agency, he pulled his phone closer, ready to text his parents with his ideas for a follow-up. But as he encroached upon typing the first word, doubts lingered. Would they embrace this collaborative exploration? Or would those old fears rear their heads, threatening to stifle his nascent development? As he hovered over the screen, uncertainty collided with anticipation. The waves of ambition crashed against the rocky shore of familial expectations. Charlie realized that the next conversation would not just be pivotal for the villa. It would challenge him to draw boundaries around his passions while inviting his family to co-create a new understanding of who he was. What if this was merely the beginning of a journey toward true reconciliation in the pursuit of his dreams? What more would he unearth about himself in the process? With a deep breath, he readied himself to dive into the unknown. The time had come to face the deeper currents about what it meant to truly belong in a family and carve out his place of self-actualization. The next morning arrived with a tension that was palpable, and Charlie found himself entangled in a cacophony of conflicting emotions. The light streaming through his bedroom window felt almost intrusive, an unwelcome reminder of the responsibility that lay ahead. He wrestled with his thoughts as he prepared for the call with his parents, knowing that the stakes had never felt higher. His heart raced, echoing the cadence of his hopes and fears. Holding the phone in one hand, he paced the length of his small room, replaying the strategies he had devised the night before. He had their concerns etched into his mind, the financial burdens, the fear of failure, and the worry that his ambitions would push him away from them. It was as if each anxiety had morphed into a phantom, lurking in the corners of his psyche, waiting to derail his intentions. But this time he was determined to confront them directly. Finally, he dialed their number. The ringing felt like an eternity, each tone amplifying his growing trepidation. Just as he was about to second-guess himself, his mother's familiar voice broke through. "Charlie, is everything okay?" She sounded tentative, worry seeping through her words. It struck him then that they were both trying to navigate uncharted waters together. "Yeah, Mom, I'm good," he replied, forcing an air of calm. "I've been thinking about our last conversation and wanted to share some ideas." As he laid out the proposal for a collaborative approach, he could hear the rustle of papers as his parents processed his words. It was surreal, sharing not just his vision for the villa, but also an invitation for them to step into his world. As he spoke, a part of him felt exposed, the very essence of his unchecked ambitions laid out before them like a canvas awaiting its first stroke. His father's voice broke through, dubious but thoughtful. "Charlie, what if this doesn't work out? You need to understand the realities here." Though he could sense the familiar threat of skepticism, it felt less like an insurmountable wall, and more like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I know, Dad, but what if we can tackle those realities together?" The desperation in his voice surprised him, revealing an unanticipated vulnerability. "I want to hear your concerns and discuss them openly. I don't want to rush into this without considering what matters to you." A silence followed, stretching and suffocating. Charlie's heart thudded. A countdown to insight or confrontation. His mother finally spoke. That's a step I didn't expect." She sounded softer, less rigid, as if a seed of curiosity was planted where fear used to reside. Charlie seized the moment, his confidence swelling. "Maybe we can start by pulling the ideas I've outlined for the villa together, incorporating some of our past experiences. Your input could help make it something we can all feel good about." He paused, sensing the door slightly opening. "What if we met to discuss this? Make it a family project?" The potential for transformation hung in the air like heavy fog, obscuring the future yet brimming with possibility. What if this project became a sanctuary, not just a villa, but a bridge to mending their relationships? Their fears were not adversaries. They could be allies if woven into this journey. As they began to express their thoughts about the potential collaboration, Charlie could feel a tense knot start to loosen. It was a fragile start, yet it felt monumental. The walls that had kept them apart cracked under the weight of their combined visions, slowly reshaping their interactions. Yet, just as optimism edged into view, the shadow of uncertainty loomed larger. They discussed the financial implications, the timelines, the emotional investment required. Would the enthusiasm translate into action? Would his parents rally around his dream? Or would their doubts resurface, threatening to suffocate this fragile alliance? As the conversation wound down, Charlie dared to ask, "So what do you think? Can we approach this together?" He held his breath, aware that he stood on the cusp of a deeper confrontation, one that not only involved the villa, but also probed at the heart of their family's shared identity. Would his parents embrace this opportunity to change the narrative? Or would he ultimately be cast back into the shadows of their fears? In that murky space of silence, the reality set in. This was not merely about bricks and mortar. It was about rebuilding a foundation of trust. The next step loomed ominously before him, and Charlie felt the weight of what lay ahead, a journey into reconciliation that would test not only his ambitions but the fabric of their family altogether. He was on the brink of something profound yet uncertain. What other truths about himself and his family would he unearth in the process? As the call ended, Charlie sat in silence, the echoes of his parents' words wrapping around him like a thick fog. He placed the phone down, heart pounding with the weight of what had just transpired. Their cautious optimism swirled in his mind, mingling with his own lingering doubts. Could a family project truly rejuvenate their relationships? The vision felt both exhilarating and terrifying. It was clear that they were standing on the brink of transformation, yet a profound sense of uncertainty lurked in the shadows. Charlie's mind raced as he considered the next steps. He pulled out a notebook, flipping to a fresh page. The idea of collaboration had taken root, but now it was essential to transform it into something tangible. He began sketching out a plan not just for the villa, but for the family. Under Villa Project, he jotted down brainstorms, small sketches, and aspirations. Each line reminded him of his childhood, those moments spent watching his mother's decorations transform their home, and his father's gruff satisfaction at completing a laborious task. This project needed to tap into those memories. It would be more than just a structure. It would be a tapestry woven from their lives, their shared stories, and most importantly their shared fears. Charlie's chest tightened with resolve. He wouldn't just be a dreamer. He would be a planner, an orchestrator of their collective path forward. Hours slipped by as he immersed himself in his thoughts, sketching out timelines and milestones. He saw the possibility of weekly meetings, where they could discuss their progress, fears, and ideas in open space free of judgment. The idea of laughter and collaboration painting the walls of the villa filled him with a surge of hope. Yet the specter of doubt pushed against him, whispering his parents' hesitations from earlier. What if they didn't follow through? What if their worries overrode their willingness to try? Later that evening, while preparing dinner, the weight of his thoughts began to manifest physically. He sliced vegetables with an unusual intensity, the knife biting through flesh with precision that matched the tension coursing through him. Lost in contemplation, he reflected on how deeply ingrained those fears were in him. They had shaped him, the worry of failure embedded into his very identity. But he recalled that moment of vulnerability during the call, opening up to his parents, and the way their guardedness had begun to shift. The realization struck this project wasn't just about architectural design. It was a reconstruction of familial bonds. A realization dawned. He held more control than he had previously believed. He no longer had to step delicately around their fears. Instead, he could confront them with honesty, inviting dialogue rather than defensive silence. The next day, he decided to set the groundwork by inviting them over for dinner not as a mere gesture, but as the first act of rebuilding. He wanted to share his vision in a space they all cherished, hoping the warmth of togetherness would encourage open hearts. He would present his notes and sketches not as demands, but as invitations to participate in a family narrative waiting to unfold. As he tidied up his small apartment after that evening's culinary endeavors, the gravity of what lay ahead pressed on him like a weight. With every touchpoint he prepared the comfortable seating, the aroma of simmering spices, he confronted another layer. His desire. He discovered a kernel of determination within him. The dinner would be a vital step toward transforming their dynamic, and perhaps more than that. But as excitement filled him, a seed of apprehension remained. What if his parents rejected his plans? What if their ingrained fears stunted this fragile opportunity? Questions spun in his mind like a dirge, echoes of the past warning him against hope. Looking out the window, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Charlie felt an odd mixture of anticipation and dread. The weight of possibility rested heavily on his shoulders, yet he knew deep inside that he needed to push forward. Tomorrow would bring clarity. Tomorrow would reveal if they were ready to embrace change, or if their fears would once again shadow the light of his dreams. As he prepared for the forthcoming dinner, a thought flickered like a flame. What was truly at stake, not just for the villa, but for them as a family? This newfound resolve and vulnerability propelled him forward, nudging him toward a confrontation that could reshape their future. Would they step willingly into this unknown journey with him, or would the weight of the past drag them back once more? Charlie awoke the next day with a knot in his stomach. The sun crept shyly through the curtains, illuminating the thoughts tumbling chaotically in his mind. As if the brightness of the morning was mocking his unease, he buried his face deeper into the pillow for a moment, wrestling with the imminent wave of family dynamics that loomed ahead. Today was the day of the dinner, his first significant step towards bridging the distance between him and his parents. He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and took a deep breath. The muted aroma of yesterday's spices still lingered in his tiny apartment, mixed with the faint scent of fresh coffee. Coffee, a ritual he often shared with his parents that would serve as a perfect touchstone. Charlie felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. He would navigate this dinner not merely as a family gathering, but as the beginning of a shared journey toward healing. In the kitchen, Charlie meticulously prepared each dish, drawing on old family recipes that held memories like tightly packed boxes. He recalled his mother stirring the sauce with care, her hand moving rhythmically as she shared stories of his childhood. For a moment he lost himself in the rhythm of chopping, the way the knife gleamed under the light, a symbolism that echoed his deliberation to carve out a new narrative for their family. He took his time with the presentation, arranging the food with an artistic flair that surprised him. It had been a long time since he had taken pride in such details. As he set the table, placemats lined up perfectly, utensils aligned like soldiers ready for battle against silence, he felt a dual sense of purpose. A desperate hope for connection and a nagging urge to shield his heart from potential rejection. As the clock ticked closer to their arrival, anxiety curled around Charlie, several times almost overwhelming him. He practiced different conversational paths in his mind, words he felt would bring clarity, but could at the same time push them back into retreat. Would they see his vision? Would they understand that this was not just a project but an opportunity to rebuild their frayed relationships? When the doorbell rang, Charlie's heart raced. He steadied himself, took one more breath, and opened the door. His parents stood there, smiling but guarded, a mix of excitement and apprehension dancing in their eyes. The warmth of their presence enveloped him, but beneath the surface lay unopened wounds. They entered, the familiar grooves of their shared history blossoming in the air. He led them to the dining area, gesturing towards the inviting spread before them. Conversations flowed hesitantly at first, seasoning the food with poignant memories that swirled just out of reach. Charlie watched carefully, gauging their reactions, learning what felt comfortable and what might send them spiraling back. After a few moments of small talk, he decided it was time to peel back the layers. With a measured voice, he began to share his vision, unfolding his sketches with care. Each page reflected not only his aspirations but also his vulnerability. He crafted his words with precision, trying to highlight the potential for togetherness, how their individual strengths could converge to create something beautiful. But as he spoke, he could sense their hesitation flickering like candle flames under a brisk wind. His father's brow furrowed, and his mother's eyes darted momentarily to the sketches as if they were measuring the weight of the promises he laid out. The well of doubt flooded back, reminding him of the stakes. This was not just about a villa but a rebuilding of trust, of broken moments he had longed to mend. Issues of control, communication, and vulnerability began unraveling in the room. In this close-knit space, nestled between laughter and shared meals, Charlie confronted the very real possibility of stepping deeper, of risking the rejection he so feared, intimately aware that the risk he believed necessary might scare them away. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a thought crossed his mind, igniting a fierce determination. What if the only path to the future we dream of is through the raw space of today? Charlie shifted his tone, leaning into the discomfort that hung between them, determined to illuminate the unspoken fears. How much longer would they let past habits define their connection? As he held their gazes, willing them to see the possibility rather than the fear, he realized something profound. He needed to embrace not just their potential reluctance, but his own awareness of what real vulnerability meant. It was time to confront not only their fears but also his own. A sudden thought took root in his mind, intensifying the moment. Perhaps it wasn't just the villa's foundation he needed to build, but a new emotional architecture for their family, beginning with honesty and rawness. How would they react when he laid bare the real stakes, beyond mere bricks and walls? He glanced at their faces, catching a flicker of curiosity behind the walls they had carefully constructed. In that moment, Charlie knew the conversation was about to shift dramatically, and he was ready to navigate the terrain of unresolved emotions, if only he could summon the courage to speak. Would tonight truly reveal the depths of their commitment, or the shadows of their avoidance? As the evening unfurled, Charlie's heart raced with anticipation. The warm glow of the dining room illuminated the faces of his parents, yet that familiar tension shimmered just beneath the surface. His hands trembled slightly, but as he clutched the papers before him, he surged forward, determined to confront the chasm that had too long separated their dreams. Before we delve into the details, Charlie began, his voice steady yet warm, I want to talk about what each of us seeks. This villa, this project, it's about more than just the aesthetic or financials. For me, it symbolizes a rebirth and opportunity for us to reimagine not just a house, but our family's narrative. His mother leaned in, concern etching her features. But Charlie, we worry. Change can lead to risks that might not pay off. I understand, he replied earnestly, but remaining stagnant has its own set of consequences. I've realized that pursuing my dreams doesn't negate your love. Rather, it honors it. It's about blending our histories and aspirations into something meaningful. Silence settled around the table as they absorbed his words. He could see the conflict flickering in their eyes, love battling against fear. With renewed conviction, Charlie continued, I want this project to honor all of us. We can incorporate your ideas, your insights. Think of this as a chance to collaborate to strengthen our ties through shared efforts. The tension that had once felt suffocating began to ebb, replaced by a tentative curiosity. His father's brow furrowed, but there was no longer a defensive posture. How do you envision this working? It's not that we don't want to support you, Charlie, but we've seen dreams crumble before. Charlie took a deep breath. Then let us build it together. We start with a series of meetings engaging with the design, the plans, the visions. I'd love for each of you to voice your thoughts and even include pieces of our family history that resonate with you. His mother's eyes softened. You really believe we could work as a team? After all these years? Absolutely, Charlie affirmed. I've spent years underestimating the power of our connections. I don't just need you to accept my project. I want you to be part of shaping it. As the evening progressed, their discussion unfolded, unfurling layers of memories intertwined with dreams. They began sharing their visions. His mother spoke of a garden and homage to the plants from their early days that once filled their home with vibrant life, while his father suggested workspace features that reflected productivity intertwined with comfort. Each suggestion felt like a stitch, weaving their frayed connections back together. Joy bubbled amid apprehensions, and laughter began to punctuate their words, beckoning them closer to acceptance and understanding. A bold thought struck Charlie as he listened to them. What if we turn these conversations into a family tradition? Weekly dinners where we talk about dreams and challenges, not just of the project, but of each other's lives. For the first time that evening, the air felt buoyant, filled with potential rather than burdens. The moment sat with him as he glimpsed the resolve shining back at him from his parents' faces. He was no longer just an aspiring architect of dreams. He was becoming a catalyst for change within their family. With every heartfelt exchange, walls he'd once believed were impenetrable crumbled. They were speaking candidly, allowing vulnerability to lead. And for Charlie, that light set aflame a newfound purpose. As they savored the last bites of dinner, he realized that the work ahead would transcend the villa. It was a journey toward cultivating unity. They could embrace his ambition without sacrificing their bond, enhancing it instead. As the dinner ended and Charlie bid his parents good night, their smiles lingered, and with it, he felt the warmth of fulfillment ripple through him. He had seen their fears, faced his own, and built a bridge where he once saw an impassable divide. Charlie stepped back into the living room, the clutter from prior plans seeming trivial compared to the emotional leap they had just taken. This was a triumph, a tangible accomplishment rooted in patience, dialogue, and authenticity. In reclaiming their shared narrative, he found liberation and purpose woven seamlessly together. What had once been merely a house on a hill had transformed into a shared vision, a symbol of hope, reformation, and resilience. His confidence surged. He understood that this was merely the inception of a profound and ongoing evolution. It was time to embrace the beauty of collective dreams intertwined by familial love. This was his achievement, a bold, lasting shift in identity both personally and professionally, allowing him to thrive. A villa awaited, not just brick and mortar, but a celebration of their journey toward reconnection and hope. Now one final crucial step awaited. His call to action. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss out on more incredible journeys of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and unlock even more uplifting stories. Comment with your reactions and theories about Charlie's incredible journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how dreams can heal and unify.